Welcome to Reflections, a program where we discuss values and virtues for the transformation of the individual and the society at large. I am Father George Ehusani, and I have with me in the studio today Ijomah Henry.
Thank you, Father.
Henry, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Father, for having me.
Henry is a young person, Nigerian youth, leaders of tomorrow. He represents leaders of tomorrow. Henry is a banker. He is head transaction services in the Sky Bank PLC. Henry has a BSc in computer science from Nnamdi Azikiwe University and a master's degree in business psychology in VIEW. Henry is co-founder of Reformers Forum.
Yes, Father.
You will tell us what the Reformers Forum is.
Of course.
He's a member of the Friends of Terra, which is a group that meets every month to discuss values and virtues for the transformation of Nigeria. He is a lead partner in Learning Dimension. Learning Dimension is also
An organization to use education to advance social change.
You also have Reformers Forum. What
Yes.
does that do?
At age 13, I was worried about what people of my time, youth of my time, were turning into. So I got a few friends of mine who were thinking like I was thinking, who were outraged about the menace of society. And we came together and said, look, there's something about our learning process. There's something about the education we're getting in school. A lot of people get into school, come out, and they are not changed. So we started using campaign, going from one place to the other, talking to youth, talking to people in society to see how we could transform society in our thought, using education as a background.
To change the thinking of people,
yes.
the attitude.
Of course.
Great. Now let me begin by reading a poem which I wrote several years ago, maybe 25 years ago. I call it Youth. Youth, let no one despise your youth, dear child, for youth is beauty, youth is vitality, youth is ability. Let no one despise your youth, precious child, for youth is animation, youth is passion, youth is vision. Let no one despise your youth, fine child, for in the tender heart of youth lies the future promise of love, of joy, of bliss. Let no one despise your youth, gracious child, for in youth is the seed of wholesome humanity. In youth is the foundation of the kingdom of peace. Let no one despise your youth. Now, what you have said about age 13 beginning a group or initiating a group to say these wonderful values we read about in the gospel, how do we put it into practice? I mean, it's fantastic initiative. I can only congratulate you for being one of those young Nigerians that as early as age 13 brought people together to start reformers, Reformers Forum, to reform society. Now, about how many years ago is that?
That's about 20 years ago.
About 20 years ago. So, today, when you look back, what has society achieved? Is society a bit better than it was 20 years ago? This is 1997 or so. Is society better than it was 20 years ago?
I will not say that society is better, because I am more agitated now than I was at
that time.
More because of my innocence. So I didn't look at other dimensions of life. My childhood innocence, I could have looked away from several other things. But now I know better. Now, with my social experiences and contact with other people, I don't believe society has gotten better.
Society has not gotten better. That's rather frightening.
That's very
frightening.
For
a young person, I mean, I'm nearly 60, so I can only look back and say, wow. Because when I was young, when I was 13, this society was a lot better. We had just overcome the crisis of the Civil War, and I was in high school, and there were all kinds of prospects for a better Nigeria. We were looking forward to a new Nigeria. We had put the Civil War behind us, and we were looking forward to a new Nigeria of unity and of progress and rehabilitation and reconciliation. But clearly, today, we seem to have gone politically, and in terms of national stability, we seem to have gone to pre-Civil War times in terms of tension and mutual suspicion and so on. Added to that, you now have the terrorism and then the kidnapping and the armed robbery and so on, which were not there in any
time past.
Yes. So I look at young people and I'm like, what do you young people think of the present circumstances? How do the circumstances of today, how do they make you feel as a young Nigerian who wants to live your life in this country? You are married and you are raising little children. Yeah. What does it look to you in terms of the future of our children and our children's children?
I will tell you, Father, that part of the things that gave me the insights I had in life was the fact that my mother once said something to me. I came out to the sitting room and I saw a cup of water on the table. Normally after meal we are supposed to clear the table, so obviously one of my siblings finished eating and didn't clear the table. So I came out and I was, who kept the cup here? I was just complaining. And she walked up to me and said, yes, it is proper that you complain, but do something about it. Take it away.
Take the cup away rather than just complain.
So I took that lesson and I grew with it. So when you see something wrong,
do something about it.
Be worried about it. In fact, you need to be worried about it, but you have to do something about it. Now, part of the problem we have is all of us are worried about our situation, but we should do something about it. What do we do really? We should begin to change our mindsets, because part of the problems we have is that we have minds that are already corrupted. Minds that are not willing to do anything that is good.
Does that include young people?
Of course. More in the part of the young people. More because we do not understand what is good and bad anymore. What we have now is conformity to the pattern of crowd mentality. What is popular is now seen to be right.
You see that a lot on social media.
So much. Now, unfortunately for us, we are in an age that is defined by social fundamentalism. Very often people talk about religious fundamentalism and fanaticism. Very little people talk about social fundamentalism. This age is seriously marked by social fundamentalism. A lot of people just want to conform to what is happening in society without thinking whether it is right or wrong.
Somebody has said that one of the major problems we have today is acute mental laziness. Acute mental sloth. People are lazy. People are not thinking, are not using their minds. We were created to be Homo sapiens, thinking beings, but we are more like Homo consumers, who are just consuming ideas. We just consume without processing them. Styles, dress styles, lifestyles, we just copy without thinking, is this really good for me? And looking at young people, because you see, the society of our dream, those who will be beneficiaries are young people. It is not people who are 70 and 80 today. A lot of young people sit down and they are complaining about their leaders that are in their 70s and 80s, or those of my generation
who are already on the pathway
towards retirement. And I'm like, if you who are 20, 25, 15, if you don't do something about your society, the people you are complaining about are on their way out.
You see, part of the challenge, Father, is that when we continue to ignore our environment, we become enslaved to that same environment. A lot of us think that all the mess that is happening around, well, let me just do what is good for me, and you ignore the entire mess that is going on around you. What happens is that you become enslaved to that mess. So in some sense, we are all victims to the troubles that society holds now. So we must begin step by step to redeem it. There is what is called social facilitation system. Now, part of the problems we have seen in society did not happen overnight.
No.
From having wrong models, wrong reward systems, and the penchant for quick fixes, just like you have mentioned, mental slots. A lot of people don't want to think. So whatever I give to you, you just take, because you see one or two persons who are doing the same, without processing whether it is right. Actually, we are supposed to have a philosophy of life that pushes us to think, my actions, is it good? Yes, the consequences of every action. Normally, if it is good for society, that is when I can consider it to be good for my family. If it is good for my family, that's when I can consider that it is good for me. But we have a complete reversal of that thinking. So people do what they feel is good for them, without considering the consequences on the family and on the larger society.
You know, when I keep saying that, and earlier today I was saying it somewhere, when Nigerians say, oh, that person has done well for himself, I really think that it is one of the major expressions of our social pathology.
Of course,
to say somebody has done well for himself or herself. And I always try to correct the people that it is not a compliment to say that somebody has done well for himself. Because you see, it is only in the process of doing well for others that it becomes good for yourself. You are not supposed to go around doing well for yourself. Do well for others. And when you do well for others, the person who hands another person a rose flower, the sweet smell of the rose will remain in your hand.
Because you know that we didn't create ourselves. There's a being that created us that is much more beyond us, and we are supposed to be continuations of that creation. So we are from a source, and we must remain source to other people. Whether you argue in part of religion or from science, evolution is continuous. And so if we try in any way to truncate it, then we create a problem for the entire balance of humanity. Now, the person who is doing well for himself is not doing anything to contribute to the benefit of society. You only do well for yourself when you have started doing something that society benefits from, because you are part of society. And so for us who are in the younger age bracket, we have lamented enough. We have talked about all the ills of society. We have looked at it.
It is time.
Part of the problem is that sense of outrage, we are losing it.
Oh, we're even losing the sense of outrage.
People are already losing the sense of outrage. So the syndrome now is, if you can't beat them, join them.
Well, if you join them in the rotten system, the rotten system will consume you all.
You know, you see, part of the problems we have is that we have free will. How I wish that God created us without that free will.
But that's the best thing God has given to us.
That's the best thing He gave to us. Now, my little knowledge of science tells us that evolution is the increase in complexity of life. But it gets to a point where that complexity begins to degenerate, and it will lead to destruction. So there's a possibility, that's what science calls entropy. There's a possibility that this increase in our complexity will lead to our self-destruction. And part of what is happening in society, if it is not checked, will lead to our own destruction. Once I asked someone, this tattoo you are wearing on your body, you know, it's become commonplace now to see people wearing tattoo, doing things. And he said, well, that's what's in vogue. And I told him, I said, you know, you are free to do whatever you like with your body. You are free to draw this tattoo. But have you thought of the commercial benefit that it gives to the artist? So we have freedom to do what we want to do, but there seems to be a sense in which some kind of merchandising of this freedom is happening now. And so a lot of people are pushed into it because, especially because of the media. I
mean, the media has played a powerful role for good and for ill. You know, some 29 years ago, I was in the US, my first trip to the US, and then I saw firsthand the power of advertisement, especially advertisement in colors, and how it captivates people and lead a lot of people. Later I read a book that is called Media Sexploitation.
Professor K.
Yeah, media's exploitation and how the subliminal instincts of people are exploited for commercial benefit. Then I learned also this whole thing about how to create what is cool. How to create what is cool, where serious commercial people who have done a lot of business psychology, like you have done business psychology, they just study how do we get human beings to consume this item that they don't need. How do we get them to buy more and more of this item that we produce? We know they don't need it, but we need to work on their psyche in order to make money.
Yeah.
And they make big money from stupid people. People who are not using their heads. They use celebrities, they use the media, and they bombard people who are not using their heads, and those ones just keep buying. Just keep buying.
You know, there's what is called heuristics. Now it's a term used for mental shortcuts. Like you mentioned that a lot of people are lazy to think now. Part of the things that will liberate our generation is if we have people who can think critically. To think critically is to think from a disciplined perspective. Think clearly, and of course make decisions that are informed by evidence. Now a lot of people are busy worrying about the cares of life and trying to become what the images that they paint of themselves that they want to become. Now in the process of being so busy about the cares and worries of life, we don't find time to think. And that is where advertisement has come in. So use heuristics, some clues
to think for you.
They think ahead of you. They think for you and suggest things for you. Especially using subliminal techniques.
Yes.
Using sexual and erotic dimensions to these techniques. And a lot of people are just carried away. You know, you are carried away and you keep consuming. Very recently I wrote an article on it, said from Homo sapiens to Homo consumptus, borrowing a word from you as well. That normally we're created to be thinking animals. Beings, yes. But what we have now is that we are consuming animals. We are not thinking again. And that is part of the problem we have in society today. All the ills that we are seeing are because people just want to be part of the crowd. So and I say to young people that it is not enough to be part of the crowd. Be part of the crowd for good. Because this free will that we enjoy, this freedom that we enjoy, just like any other force, can be used for good and for bad.
I just get frightened when I think about how little people are thinking and how little people are reading. In an information age, in an age that is driven by information, if you have a generation of young people who don't read, I mean, we now have in this country the phenomenon whereby graduates, people who went to university and graduated in various disciplines, can go for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years and not read a book.
It's possible.
Now, that is very dangerous for society. Number one, democracy is supposed to be based on education, on an enlightened population. The various developments in society, even the use of a lot of this social media, a lot of the tools of communication, you need a level of education.
Sure.
Now, if we have a crop of young people, many of who do not read, many of who are mentally lazy, then it is very easy to conquer them. Very easy. Whether it is a dictator that emerges, or it is a business conglomerate that emerges and conquers the people. I mean, conquer them emotionally, mentally, psychologically, because they are not using their head. So, you are a young person. How can we use the tools of modern technology? How can we use it to make the people change? So that if somebody went to university and came out, that he has a hunger, she has a hunger to continue to educate himself or herself. How do we do that for young people in this generation?
You see, Hitler once said that I use emotion for the many and I reserve reason for the few. And once I read that those who think must govern those who toil. These are basic truths that we must learn. Now, part of the problems we have and which we need to contain is the fact that beyond just assenting to proposals from here and there, we must think within ourselves, look at the proposals that people bring to us, and see how we can sieve it to take the good out of it. We must read. We must listen to those who are enlightened, people who have words of wisdom to share. Up to now, we still talk about some role models from old, and we are not getting new role models.
Yeah, and that's surprising.
It's surprising. What it means is that
when we're looking for role models, we're talking of Zik and we're talking of Awolowo. Now,
at
where
this age,
are the
where
others?
there are more people who had lived after them, and these people are no more role models. Now, what will happen is that we must begin to grow role models in our time. Part of the problems we have is wrong social reward system. Our reward systems seem to favor those who are slots, people who don't work hard. You see, this get-rich syndrome has become one of the problems. Everybody wants to get rich without working. I taught a group of young people, and I was insisting that you make money when you add value. But I tell you for sure that there are a lot of people who are making money today without adding value. And now these people are celebrated in society. So when they are celebrated, the younger ones who are behind them look up to them as models. But if I am working so hard and I am making some strides of success, the person who is behind will want to look at me and emulate it. But they see someone who comes from the blues and in 2 days is mega rich. So the person may want to emulate that person instead of me.
Because it's harder
so
to work
first,
for money.
We must celebrate those who are cerebral, people who are reading. We have people in universities, professors who are doing research, and nobody talks about them. And so the young ones don't have anybody to look up to.
They don't want to be a
so
professor.
When they see a professor, they say, that man is Richard. They don't want to be a professor. They don't want to be teachers. And the few ones who are so intelligent enough don't want to even venture into academics. So now we must begin to look at the reward system for those who are in academics.
Reward system for those
who are working hard.
Yes.
It may not be in monetary terms alone, but even in recognition, simple recognition, to make them beacons of light for those who are coming behind. But when we make the rogues and just anybody who has made money beacons, make them icons for society to look at, then we're setting wrong examples for people. Now, part of what we were doing in Reformers Forum, or which friends too are doing, is to say, if we cannot go out to meet everybody we think needs change, the little people around us, we can influence them by the good things we do.
Your sphere of influence.
That sphere of influence. So it must start from that. Because the entire society is a pool. I am in Abuja, but yes, there's another place called Lagos. There's another place called Ibadan. And people are living there. And these people are connected to me in some way or the other. So what I do in this little sphere has an effect in the person who is moving away from here. So somebody could be in Abuja and have a good experience with me and moves on to Ibadan and talks to somebody in Ibadan. And before you know, we begin to regenerate these good deeds in every person. Until we replicate this small good from small spheres, we will not make progress. Nobody should be deceived to think that we'll look at that big good, to think that there will be one Superman that will come out as president or as governor of a state to change everything. No. Even while we expect those changes in them, we must look inwards and do something. Do something. When I had a course on goal setting, and part of the injunctions from it says, every single day, do something that leads you closer to your goal.
Yes.
The same thing applies to us in society. If we want this society to be better, every single day, we must each do something that leads us closer to a good society.
Saying that, before we end, can you identify 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 or 5 things we must do as Nigeria to lead us to the country of our dream, that the young people who are watching us now can identify? They say, look, Henry came on screen and he said, in order for us to arrive at the Nigeria of our dream, we must do this 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you give us an idea?
First and foremost, we must live sincerely.
Sincerity.
Sincerity is key.
Okay.
There's a lot of deceit in society.
We must live with sincerity. Good.
We must make individual sacrifices.
Sacrifice.
There's so much sense of of
Entitlement.
entitlement in society. We must begin from ourselves to shed some of those entitlements. We must live for the common good.
We must live for the common good.
There are a lot of people who don't believe that other people around them should have some benefits. We must live each day for the common good.
So that not only me,
Not
myself,
only
and
me.
I. Yeah.
Because while I am trying to get other people to be like, of course, I mentioned to someone the other day that, look, the man who is begging on the street could just be you. So you have just enjoyed some privilege not being him. So if you must do something that helps him get out of that street where he's begging. So our lives and the actions we take must be for common good.
Good.
And fourthly, I would say we must look up to God for direction.
We must look up to God for direction. Before looking up to God for direction, which is the ultimate, what about discipline in this society?
We are in a society that is characterized by high level of indiscipline.
Good.
And
So
when we say indiscipline, is not just in orderly behavior. To be disciplined people means we understand the responsibility that comes from the decisions and choices we make.
good.
If we have people in society who understand that every single decision I make, every single action I take has consequences, we will live a better society.
So on that note, we must care for the common good, not just ourselves. We must be sincere. We must be disciplined.
Yes.
And
We'll look up to God.
we must look up to God.
direction.
On that note, we will end this segment of the program. I've been speaking with Henry Ijomah, a young person who is very passionate about changing the society, changing the attitudes of Nigerians, and focusing on young people to see that with the agencies that he is involved in, Friends of Terra, Learning Dimension, and Reformers Forum, to reach out to those in his sphere of influence for a better Nigeria. Henry, it was wonderful having you in this
Thank you,
studio.
Father.
Thank
for
you.
having me. Thank you.